Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Just a quick but hopefully exciting update for those of you who are fans of Final Fantasy X. We've spoken about Final Fantasy X-3 in the past, in previous episodes, and of course it's something that fans have been asking for many, many years now. And we do know with Final Fantasy VII Remake that Square are not going to be afraid of revisiting their older Final Fantasy titles if they believe there is still an audience for them, which I genuinely believe that there is. So let's have a look at this article here on RPG site. This is a translation of Tetsuya Nomura's words in a recent issue of the Japanese magazine Famitsu. So let's go ahead and see what Nomura said. If we are to make X-3, by the way, I could be wrong, but I believe this is like perhaps the first time that somebody official at Square has actually delved into this topic of Final Fantasy X-3. So he says, if we are to make X-3, we somehow have a synopsis written by Nojami-san. So Katsushige Nojami, I'll struggle with these names, Nojima, was the original story director, I believe, on Final Fantasy X. So if he could come back for Final Fantasy X-3, then that would of course be fantastic. So yeah, explains character designer Tetsuya Nomura, who's recently been busy, yada yada yada. It's sleeping right now, but the plot itself does exist. I had the opportunity to work with people who entered the game industry after playing FF7, but now that phase has moved and now I'm going with people who entered after playing FF10. Right. Okay, so it's not in active development. We need to understand that. If this is going to be a potential release in the future, Final Fantasy X-3, I wouldn't expect it anytime soon. But at the very least, it is something that Square are clearly talking about. Now, it sounds like they may have been working on it in the past. It's sleeping right now makes me think that they had started working on it, but put it to one side in order to focus on other projects, such as the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And of course, with Final Fantasy VII Remake, they had some older people on board. I don't mean older as in age, but those that were on the original game, and also a whole fresh load of new talent that played and loved the original game. And it sounds like that's the plan they would want to do for Final Fantasy X-3. And of course, having Nojima back on board as the scenario writer so that he can continue the story would also be a good idea as well. Now, as for the plot itself, it's noted here on RPG site that it is likely going to be based upon Final Fantasy X Will, which was kind of an audio drama commentary that played over the credits in Final Fantasy X HD Remaster. And quick spoiler alert about that, okay, in that effectively Sin returns. So there's no battle against Sin in that, but obviously that's what it's leading to. So whether this will serve as a prequel to X-3 or whether X-3 will incorporate that, we'd have to wait and see. But also it's worth noting on the timing of the potential release of Final Fantasy X-3, as I mentioned, it would be a long time in the future. And that's because Square are saying that they're not going to be doing anything with it whilst Final Fantasy VII Remake is still in production. The probability is not zero though, Toriyama says, and he was the original lead on Final Fantasy X, but we are not in a phase where we can talk about it unless we have finished producing FF7 Remake. And of course, that means all of the projects within Final Fantasy VII Remake, not just the part 1 that has already been released. Like I say, just a quick video. I'm going to be honest, I'm suffering a little bit with hay fever here. But what do you want to see from Final Fantasy X-3? Please do share down in the comments. You know, the battle system in Final Fantasy X, it was one of the favourites of mine out of the Final Fantasy battle systems. I love the turn-based mechanics in that, and I would love to see those making a return, potentially, in Final Fantasy X-3. Although we know, of course, from Final Fantasy VII Remake that Square are not going to be afraid to change the formula up if they feel the need to do so. And the battle system in Final Fantasy X-2 was already quite different to that in Final Fantasy X. A big thank you to all of you who support the channel as patrons or YouTube members. Shout out to Eliza for becoming the latest YouTube member. Don't forget to drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed it. That does just persuade the YouTube algorithm to hopefully send other people to this video as well so we can make them aware of the news. Have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you next time.